Indira Gandhi, a name that, well, really resonates in Indian history. Huge power, but also tied to some incredibly high-stakes political gambles.
Absolutely, and that's what we're diving into today, isn't it? Trying to get under the surface of those big decisions.
Yeah, exactly. We want to understand the risks she took, the sequence of events, and how it all led to her, well, her controversial legacy and ultimately her assassination.
And what's striking when you look at the sources is this pattern, this
hmm
willingness to operate right on the edge, politically speaking.
Oh, right.
So our aim here to connect those dots for you, trace the path, understand the choices, the potential consequences, basically give you a clear pathway through this really complex period.
Think of it as the essential guide, maybe. We're extracting the core insights, not getting bogged down in every single detail.
Exactly. Quick but thorough.
So we'll touch on, her initial rise, which was kind of surprising. Then the Green Revolution, good and bad sides. The emergency, obviously a massive one.
A huge one. And then the Sikh crisis, Operation Blue Star, leading right up to the assassination.
And looking at the bigger picture, it's about seeing how these decisions, these gambles, echo outwards. Sometimes in ways nobody expected.
Yeah, the ripple effect. Hopefully you'll get some real aha moments understanding that dynamic.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Her coming to power in 66. It's interesting because the perception was, wasn't it, that she was maybe just a placeholder.
Almost an outsider, as some sources put it, even within her own party, the Congress Party. People definitely underestimated her.
They really did. And the sources highlight how quickly she flipped that script.
Right. Through these calculated moves, backroom deals, building alliances,
Yeah.
she wasn't just passively accepting the role.
No, she actively constructed her power base, lots of
Yeah.
political maneuvering. It really sets the stage, showing her willingness to, play the game and take risks right from the start.
Definitely. And speaking of risks, one of the first major ones was the Green Revolution.
Ah, yes. India was facing really serious food shortages back then, late 60s, early 70s.
A critical situation. And her response was, well, incredibly ambitious, bringing in these high-yielding varieties of crops, pushing advanced farming techniques, pouring government money into agriculture.
And on the surface, a massive success story. India achieved self-sufficiency in food. Monumental.
Absolutely huge. But, like many big gambles, there was a flip side. The sources talk about the darker implications.
Which are crucial for understanding the whole picture, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't all positive.
No, what you see is this classic development trade-off. Solve the famine crisis, yes, but the sources detail the marginalization of small farmers, people who just couldn't keep up.
Right. Couldn't afford the new tech, maybe.
Exactly. And then there's the ecological degradation from the intensive farming methods, plus the rise of these big, large-scale agribusinesses kind of dominating the scene.
So solving one major problem, but creating others, or at least exacerbating them.
Precisely. A real gamble with mixed results, you could say.
Which, I suppose, leads us into maybe the most controversial gamble of all, the emergency in 1975. The sources call it a drastic decision. What was the context there?
Well, things were getting pretty heated politically. There was increasing political unrest, a lot of public criticism aimed at her government. And this opposition movement, led by Jayaprakash Narayan, was really gaining steam.
So her justification was...
She cited internal disturbances, argued they were a threat to the country's stability, justifying the state of emergency declared on June 25, 1975.
But the reality on the ground during the emergency, the sources paint a pretty stark picture, don't they? Different from the official line.
Very different. What's really alarming, reading the accounts, is the complete suspension of civil liberties.
Like what specifically?
Well, the curbing of political opposition, for starters. Thousands arrested opposition leaders, activists, journalists just locked up without trial. Habeas corpus gone.
Wow. And censorship on the press, too.
Oh, yeah. A total clampdown. It was a massive expansion of state power, really changing the fundamental relationship between the government and the people.
And amidst all that, there was the mass sterilization campaign. That's mentioned quite starkly.
It is.
Yeah.
The sources talk about the forced sterilization of hundreds of thousands of men, part of a population control drive. It's a deeply disturbing element of that period.
Just shows the extent of state control she felt she had or perhaps needed.
It really does. And while, yes, it might have temporarily shored up her power, the backlash was inevitable.
Huge public outrage.
Widespread public outrage, as the sources put it. led directly to the Congress Party getting booted out in the '77 elections.
But here's the thing, even after that defeat, she bounces back, remained a major force. It says a lot about her political skill, or maybe just tenacity.
Absolutely. Resilience is definitely a word that comes up.
Okay, let's move to another really difficult chapter, the Sikh crisis. This ultimately leads, well, we know where it leads.
Yes. It starts with the rise of the Sikh separatist movement in Punjab. And this figure, Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, becomes central.
He initially had ties to Congress, right? But then shifted.
He did. Initially some connections, but he later became this very powerful voice advocating for Khalistan, an independent Sikh state. And the movement became increasingly militant.
Which put Indira Gandhi in a very tough spot, leading to her decision in 1984, Operation Blue Star, described as highly controversial and dangerous.
Extremely. It was a full-scale military operation. The goal was to remove Bhindranwale and his armed followers, who had fortified themselves inside the Golden Temple complex in Amritsar.
The holiest shrine for Sikhs.
Exactly. The symbolism was immense, and the operation itself, it resulted in heavy casualties, huge loss of life, and significant destruction within the temple complex.
So the military objective, removing Bhindranwale, was achieved. He was killed, but the fallout.
The fallout was catastrophic. The sources talk about a deep rift opening up between her government and the Sikh population.
Understandably, many saw it as an attack on their religion itself.
Precisely. Not just a political or military act, but a religious desecration. And ironically, or perhaps predictably, it massively fueled the very movement it was meant to crush. Support for Khalistan surged.
And it unleashed more violence, didn't it? The sources mention the anti-Sikh riots later that year.
Yes, the 1984 anti-Sikh riots. A horrific aftermath where thousands of Sikhs were killed by mobs, largely in Delhi, in retaliation for the assassination that followed. It's a direct, tragic consequence of Blue Star.
Which brings us to the assassination itself, October 31st, 1984.
Carried out by her own Sikh bodyguards, Bin Singh and Satwant Singh. The sources are clear. It was direct retaliation for Operation Blue Star.
An incredibly shocking event, and it triggered even more violence against Sikhs across India.
Widespread violence, yes. And adding another layer of darkness, the sources note that accusations were leveled against her own family, including her son Rajiv Gandhi, suggesting complicity in allowing or even encouraging the anti-Sikh violence.
It's just awful. It really drives home the point that her death wasn't random. It felt like the endpoint of this long, complex chain of events.
The culmination, as the sources suggest, of this whole complex web of political decisions, gambles, and manipulations.
So when we look back at her legacy, it's just incredibly divided, isn't it?
Completely. Immense political and social influence on one side, deep controversy on the other. People remember the strong leadership, the ability to handle crises.
But also the authoritarian tendencies, the emergency, the riots, the social and political unrest that marked her later years.
Yeah, it's not straightforward at all.
So that central question the sources implicitly raise, visionary leader taking necessary risks, or ruthless leader hungry for power whose actions backfired.
And the truth is likely messy, probably a mix of both, depending on the specific issue and time frame you look at. It wasn't one thing or the other.
Which means, for you listening, understanding her legacy really involves grappling with these tough choices leaders make, and how even decisive actions can have consequences you just don't see coming.
Yeah, thinking about how that drive for power intersects with, what's good for the country or what protects people's rights. It's a constant tension.
Okay, so just to quickly recap the ground we've covered. Her surprising rise, the Green Revolution's double-edged sword, the huge impact of the emergency, the tragedy of Operation Blue Star and the Sikh crisis, and finally, the assassination that ended her era.
And hopefully connecting these events gives you that deeper insight into political leadership, the ambition, the responsibility, the risks. It's never simple.
Definitely not. So maybe a final thought for you to mull over. To what extent do the ends ever justify the means when it comes to political power?
And what are those long-term ripples, the repercussions from decisions made chasing those ends? Something to keep thinking about.